To replace a damaged display or rear cover of your Apple iPhone 4, you'll need a new display. These are easy to find online, and possibly a new rear cover if that's damaged. You'll also need a pentalobe and small Phillips screwdriver. The pentalobe sometimes comes supplied with a new screen. A plastic separation tool like a guitar pick or a plastic knife. To keep track of all the different screw sizes, you'll need this screw size flowchart. You can make holes to put the screws through, or use double-sided tape to keep them in place. You can print this from the link in the description. Start by removing the 2 pentalobe screws at the bottom. If it's an earlier version, it'll have small Phillips screws instead. These are the only 2 pentalobe screws used, so you can't get them mixed up with the others. Now push the cover up towards the top. That will release it, and you can replace and assemble from this stage. Before we replace the screen, it's a good idea to make sure the new one is working okay. So undo these screws which hold this black cover in place, and make sure you place the screws onto your screw size flowchart. These are all different sizes, and it's quite important not to get them mixed up. This one is quite long, so it's quite hard to get this mixed up with the others. Using a thin blade, gently ease this cover up and then place that aside. Using a plastic tool, disconnect the screen. This is the digitizer flex cable, and this one's for the main display. Let's push them back out of the way. Now take the new screen and put a slight bend in the cable, and that will enable you to plug it into the main board and connect the digitizer. And now hold the power button down. And make sure that the display is okay and the touchscreen is working. Then hold the power button down and shut down. Remove the display. And if there's any problems, you can get a replacement. Now we can disconnect the battery, removing this single screw, and using the plastic tool, just gently lift that up and push that out of the way. Take note of which way around this little earthing clip goes, and then using the plastic tool or a blunt knife, you can lever and lift the battery out. and put that aside. Now we need to remove the main board and the speaker assembly. Start with these two screws which hold a small cover in place. Take note of which way around this cover goes. You can pin this battery plastic out of the way onto the double-sided tape. That makes it a little bit easier to get to this screw. And this screw here is a little bit unusual. You need to use a bladed screwdriver to remove it. It can be a little bit tricky. Now remove the vibrating motor. Now using your plastic tool, disconnect these three flex cables. Now remove the camera. So unplug the flex cable first, and then gently lever the camera out. Make sure you remove the SIM card. Now we can disconnect the loudspeaker assembly. And there's some double-sided tape holding this on. Just gently push that out of the way. And now we can remove the screw that was hidden underneath. Now disconnect the 3G GSM antenna cable. Now we can lift the main board away from the housing. And put that aside. This gold component is the microphone for FaceTime. Now we can undo the screws that hold the screen in place. If you have trouble getting your screwdriver to work, then try different length and size screwdrivers. These large screws have a single washer, and there's no need to completely remove them. You can undo it one turn and leave the screw in place. Now remove the final screw holding the speaker assembly in. When you remove the speaker assembly, you may find a small rubber spacer falls out. This is where it's supposed to go, so make sure it goes back in the same place. And put that aside. Continue undoing the screws in the four corners. Using some heat from a fan heater or a hairdryer will make this process a lot easier, separating the plastic frame from the metal chassis. There's double-sided tape along the top and the bottom, so keep working your way around the outside edge, and it can be done cold, but it takes a lot longer to separate the adhesive. If the screen is badly shattered, you can place some tape over the screen to prevent glass splinters from making a mess. Keep working your way around the outside of the screen. If the screen's been replaced before, you'll probably find this process a lot easier. And finally, we have the screen separated from the chassis. Make sure you clean off any remains of the broken screen. Some screen kits come with fresh double-sided tape. This one didn't, so I'm going to reuse the existing tape. If you need to replace the home button switch, then start by lifting this small bar up and then lifting the flex cable out from the socket and bring it through to the other side. If you're replacing the button or the switch, you'll need to separate it. It's held on with double-sided adhesive. When you place your new button or switch, make sure you line it up with the small recess or the outline you can see on the button, and then push that down into place. Feed that back through. and push that into the socket. Make sure it's nice and straight, and push that clamp back down. Before we fit the new screen, we need to swap over the earpiece speaker grill. So gently lift that away from your old screen, and then place that onto your new one. Now we need to remove the front camera guide from your old screen. This is lightly glued on, so if you twist it, it should come off. When you place this on, make sure it lines up with the gaps around the camera and it sits down nice and flat. It's very important that when you feed these flex cables through into the casing, this part here doesn't catch on the case. If it does, and you try and put it through, it tends to tear the ribbon and you'll need another new screen. So when you feed these cables through, make absolutely sure that that very thin digitizer cable isn't caught on the casing. Here you can see it's caught, and if you try pulling it through, it will damage the flex. So it's caught at the moment, and if you pull that too hard, that's where the damage happens. Once you've got it through, double check to make sure the ribbon is free and isn't trapped. Make sure the screen clips go behind the washer. You may need to loosen the screws a bit more. And then push those clips down until they go behind the washer. There you go. Now squeeze the screen tight to the frame before you do the screw up. That will close off any gaps there might be. And make sure the screen clips are behind the washers again. Just double check to make sure the screen's sitting down nicely. Now replace the screw in each corner. Keeping that screen pushed down nice and flat as you do the screw up. If you have trouble finding the thread, then keep moving the screw about until it finds its hole. There you go. If you don't have a magnetic screwdriver, you can use any magnet to magnetize the screwdriver. If you look back through my earlier videos, you'll see how it's done. This one can be quite tricky. This one went in quite easily, but it can be hard because you can't get the screwdriver straight onto the screw. So final check to make sure that everything's okay. Double check the home button is working. Now we can replace the loudspeaker assembly. Place that in, down towards the bottom. And make sure these sprung clips are pushed down. And once they're all pushed down, replace this screw. Move the antenna flex out of the way. And we need to put a slight bend in the screen flex cable. So using a blunt instrument, just gently push and bend that over slightly. Now take the main board . If this rubber cover has fallen off, make sure you place it on in this position, as it helps protect the screen flex cable. Now offer the main board into the center top of the phone. There's a slight recess the main board locates into. You can just about see when it locates in, and you can tell if it's fully in as the screw holes will line up. So make sure that's all the way in to the top of the phone. Now we can reconnect the antenna flex cable. So move the plug until it lines up. And push that down into place. Now we can replace the vibrating motor. Now replace the slotted screw. Now reconnect those flex cables. Replace the camera. Make sure that goes all the way in. And keep moving that flex connector up and down until you feel it snap down into place. Now using the blunt instrument again, put a bend in the main screen connector and then push that down until you feel it snap into place, and then connect the digitizer. Now we can replace the metal cover. This keeps all the plugs pressed down and connected. Sometimes the nut for this screw comes off the main board, so don't worry too much if you can't use this screw. This screw normally has a white moisture indicator stuck over the top of it if the phone hasn't been repaired before. This screw holds the main board and the loudspeaker in place. Let's make sure those sprung clips are okay. Now bring that flex cable down and line that up and plug it in. Now replace that metal cover. Now we can replace the battery. Lift that plastic away from the double tape. And before we reconnect the battery, we need to replace that little earthing clip. Just place it round this way. And then push the connector down and make sure this end goes all the way in. Now replace your SIM card. and you can switch it on. And while we're waiting for that to boot, we can replace the rear cover. So push it down so it's nice and flat, and then slide it down towards the bottom. Replace those two pentalobe screws. Only do these finger tight. And you now have a fully repaired iPhone 4. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and give me the thumbs up, and I shall try my best to make some more.